Today we will be doing reinforcement on a short nail. I will demonstrate this on my index finger. I intentionally removed the coating completely so that we can start the process from scratch, and I have already prepared the nail. I already did the manicure here. All the pterygium has been removed. Here you see, everything is clean. There is nothing stuck, no remaining pieces of cuticle attached. This is extremely important for nail retention. I have downward growing or hooked nails. You can see a pronounced arch. By the way, this actually makes the technique easier and more convenient in this context. In this lesson, we will not focus too much on preparing the skin around the nail. But keep in mind, if any pterygium remains here, I will show an example of how it should not look in the next shot. If anything remains here and gets under the base layer, we will definitely get lifting. Also here my keratin layers are a bit lifted because I just removed the previous product. If you did not do removal, your nail may still have the lipid layer and look shiny. All of that needs to be removed and the keratin layers lifted. So in this first step, that is exactly what we will do. We will lift the keratin layers. I take a nail buffer and use the softer side around 180 grit, and I simply buff the nail in one direction without missing any areas so that my nail becomes completely matte, creating a slightly textured surface for better adhesion. This ensures good adhesion with the base coat. Important, we only need to slightly etch the nail. We do not need to remove as much of the top layer as possible. That would actually lead to poor retention. We only need to lift the keratin layers slightly. A buffer works perfectly for this. And of course, after that, we remove all the dust thoroughly with a wipe soaked in alcohol. You can see how the alcohol evaporates, leaving the nail dehydrated. This is exactly the surface we need for proper adhesion. Look, there are no remaining cuticle fragments and no oily layer left on the nail plate. And then the base will adhere properly. This is what a properly prepared nail looks like. Now let's apply the base layer. But first let's look at the mistakes. The first mistake is applying the base layer too thin. When there isn't enough product and you start rubbing it into the nail like this, you may miss some areas along the sidewalls. For example, like this. And here you can see there isn't enough product. It will remain like that. Then we apply gel and gel polish on top, and it will sit directly on the bare nail without base. And that will cause lifting. You will definitely get lifting if there are gaps like this along the sidewalls. The next mistake is applying too much base, a very thick layer. Then there is a chance that it will flood the cuticle area. Even a very small flood will immediately cause lifting. So you need to be very careful that the base does not flood. This is mistake number 2. Mistake number 3 is applying base on a shiny nail without buffing the nail at all. You must buff the nail. The surface must be buffed. A matte surface like this. When I wipe it, you can clearly see how the alcohol evaporates and the nail becomes completely matte. So, how do we apply the base layer correctly? Pick up a small bead of product on the brush, transfer it onto the dehydrated nail, and spread it across the entire surface. Pull back one side wall and paint it, making sure there is no flooding and everything is covered properly. Then turn the finger to the other side. It's not very convenient for me to pull the sidewall back on myself and work under the camera, but the idea is clear. We carefully paint this side completely with the brush as well, then we push the remaining product closer to the cuticle and pull the material downward. We check that there is no flooding. If there is anything here, we must immediately clean it up. Here I already have a little flooding because I was talking too long. I carefully remove it with a wooden stick. I check that the product is not pulling from under the cuticle anymore and that there is no flooding, and in this condition I can already cure it. I cured my nail in the lamp for 1 minute, as recommended for my base for full curing. I have an LED lamp, and now I will work with gel using our short nail reinforcement technique. Pay attention, I skipped the pre-shaping stage. More precisely, I left the nail about 1 millimeter longer than I actually want, so you can do a preliminary shape, leaving about 1 millimeter for final filing later. This is very important. We finalize the nail shape only after working with the gel. Now I need to reinforce my free edge. I need to immediately set the thickness of the tip of the nail using gel, so the gel itself will hold the structure. It will not bend, it will not break, and it will not be too thin. For this, I pick up a small bead of gel on the brush and distribute this small bead at the free edge in a thin rim. Like this. Look, you'll see a slight ledge forming. That's our future thickness. We immediately set the thickness. Before the gel moves, I flash cure it with a flashlight. Next step, I apply a slip layer, stepping back about 1 millimeter from the base. You see there is a gap from the cuticle. The base sits closer, the gel is slightly further away. Same thing here. So up to the growth point there is a small gap. After the growth point I no longer need that gap. The nail should be fully covered there. Same thing here. I paint it, leaving about 1 millimeter gap. On the free edge I apply gel fully. Now without curing I add more material. I place a bead, warm it slightly, spread it and pull it downward, trying to keep the movement centered on the nail. I do not press the bead down. If there is not enough, I can always add more. My goal is to pull the material down while distributing most of the product correctly. The highest point will be here, between the growth points. Near the cuticle, everything is very thin here near the cuticle. I distribute the material here and here. You can also add a little bit more on the free edge on the sides to reinforce the sidewalls. If there are some small imperfections closer to the free edge, that is not a problem. It is easy to fix. That's it. This is how my nail looks now in profile. And in this condition, I can send it to cure. The gel is now fully cured. I cured it for 1 minute in the LED lamp as recommended for my gel. This is the result. This is how the nail looks in profile. Yes, it looks thick right now, but that is exactly what we need at this stage. We will refine it later. Now I remove the dispersion, sticky layer. It always remains after curing gel. That is normal. We need to fully degrease the nail by wiping the dispersion layer downward so that we can work with the file and prevent it from clogging. The first thing I will do is adjust the nail length. I place the file perpendicular to the nail and file the length like this. My movement goes side to side since I'm creating a square shape. I also want to straighten the side walls so there is no distortion. I place the file perpendicular to the nail and make just a few movements like this. I always check the side area so I do not overfile at the growth point and do not expose my natural nail. I do not file very high where there is no product. The file is not positioned like this, but like this, at a specific angle that allows me to create my sidewall. I file one sidewall, then move to the second one and do the same. A few movements, both sides are even, they look good. I am not making a sharp square, but a slightly softened shape. That works for me. Look at the free edge. You see the thickness we created earlier. We needed the extra length to remove that thickness later. I want to shorten it just a little more. Now I need to check the lower parallel lines. What is a lower parallel? It is this part of the nail. On hooked nails it often drops downward. Here mine is slightly higher, not too dropped, but I file it immediately. Notice I do not push the file into the growth point. I position the file across the axis of the finger. The file continues the finger, not the growth point, and this way I lift the sidewall. Same on the other side. My file never points downward like this. It stays parallel with the finger, and I file this way, raising the sidewall slightly so I do not cut into the growth point. Then I can bring the file under the corners and shape the soft form I want for my nail. Now I just need to slightly smooth the surface. You see it is a bit uneven. First, I place the file flat across the nail, perpendicular to the nail, and create a small flat surface, trying not to overfile, just leveling the surface so the nail becomes even, right in the center. We already shaped the sidewalls, so now we only need to blend them into this central plane, from the edges toward the center, using circular movements in one direction, then repeat on the other side. Check the top again. If something is slightly off, I lightly refine it. I am not trying to remove material, just smoothing it. You can see the free edge is still quite thick, but the nail already looks clean and well shaped. Now we only need to make it thinner. Now we choose a drill bit. I use a carbide Christmas tree bit, speed above 20,000 revolutions per minute in forward, and now we thin the free edge. We can flip the nail and gently start under filing. Look, I can even touch my finger with the bit and nothing happens because it has a safe rounded tip. Please choose a bit like this and test it on yourself before using it on a client. Carefully start removing the natural nail and thickness from underneath. Pull the sidewall slightly. You must enter with the bit at an angle, otherwise the bit will skate across the surface, so enter at an angle and remove the material from there. Practice on yourself first, then on models, and only then on clients. Once that is done, look at the free edge and position the bit at about a 45-degree angle. Do not push it straight inside. Keep it angled and remove the small edge, making the nail thinner. The bit is angled, not pointing straight inside. This is the thickness we get. Then I take a file again and refine the shape. I place the file underneath the nail. If I file from above, I will reopen the thickness, so I work from underneath. You can buff this thickness or leave it. It doesn't really matter. I only buff if I plan not to apply color later and want to use a camouflage top so scratches are not visible. Before that, of course, we remove all the dust. And this is the nail we get. Now we can safely apply either gel polish or, like in my case, a colored top coat. I apply it like a regular top coat, cover one sidewall, then the other, push closer to the cuticle, pull downward, and add a little more in the center for leveling. I let it self-level a bit. If needed, I adjust it slightly. You can also flip the finger to help leveling. Then I send it into the lamp. This is the final result for today. The nail is thin. Look at the free edge, very natural. There is no heavy bulk. Of course, I still have this arch because it is my natural arch. You saw that my natural nail already had a pronounced arch. In fact, with this technique, we even reduced it slightly. Here, the material is applied very thinly, so it will grow out naturally and seamlessly. There is no build-up here. The transition between the cuticle, natural nail, and product is very thin. The nail is thin, with a beautiful shape. A nail like this will wear for a full month or even longer. Of course, you should not overwear it. As the nail grows, the pressure shifts and the product becomes too heavy for the tip, so make sure to do your fill on time. But this type of reinforcement will last from application until refill without lifting, chips, or breaks.